Are we in 1992 or 1993 or are we in 2025? Because the Toronto Blue Jays are on the way to the ALCS for the first time since 2016, and they are one round away from, making it to that point they were in all those years ago in 92 and 93. Welcome to BJFR. I'm your host, Scott McGregor, one of your outgoing hosts, because this show is basically run by two Blue Jay fans, myself and Thomas. But without further ado, let's get to an introduction and then we'll get right down to the reaction. Welcome to Sports for Beginners. This is the show where I cover the Pittsburgh Penguins, Toronto Blue Jays, and take you on a journey through the world of sports. From the fan's perspective, here is your host, Scott McGregor. Let's have some fun. In the immortal words of Steve Dangle, not to steal a word from Steve, but Blue Jays win the ALDS. They win 3-1 over the New York Yankees, a team that, if you remember, Blue Jays fans, they swept. And by swept, I mean the Blue Jays swept the Yankees in a 4-game series earlier this season. I am Scott McGregor, the host of Sports for Beginners, the podcast, one of the two hosts of BJFR. These are solo shows run by myself and my brother Thomas. We are both Blue Jay fans, and on the respective podcasts, you will hear my voice or his voice for these types of shows during the postseason. Blue Jays 5, Yankees 2. That was the final score of the final game of the ALDS between New York and Toronto. After the game ended, what manager John Schneider had to say to the gang after, yes, I said after, the big win. What did John say? Have a listen. All credit to Sportsnet and the Toronto Blue Jays. Have a listen. Here we go. I'm gonna wait for an ad to get out of the way here, and then you'll hear John speak to the boys. He spoke to the boys when they clinched the bye, which got them to the AL, and they clinched it a victory over the Tampa Bay Rays shortly after falling. Well, not really falling, but they did lose a game. Let's make that clear. All right, here we go. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. You want to hear what John said? You want to hear what John said after the game? Even though it's censored in this? Here you go. Enjoy. Give it a second here to get up here. There we go. Give it a second.
Single one of you, game, Nathan Lucas, Miles Straw, all you takes everybody every day. Start spreading the news.
And let the party begin. Now, it has since calmed down at Yankee Stadium, but the Blue Jays are on their way back to Toronto. They will now await the winner of Friday's showdown in Game 5 in Seattle between the Detroit Tigers and the Seattle Mariners. The ALCS will get started on Sunday in Toronto, time to be determined. I'll quickly run over how it will work for the ALCS. In terms of off days, there will only be one off day in the ALCS in between the two games that Toronto will host starting Sunday against either Seattle or Detroit. On Tuesday, October 14th, teams will travel to either Detroit or Seattle. Whoever comes out of Friday's game between the Mariners and the Tigers, that is where the Blue Jays will be traveling after the two games at home Sunday, and Monday at Rogers Center. Tuesday is the off day, most likely, unless the Jays leave for the airport on Monday. right after the game, whenever the game is scheduled to play out, we will see them hit the road on Tuesday. Then there are two games that will likely be played in either Seattle or Detroit. I say Seattle or Detroit because we don't yet know who it's going to be for the Toronto Blue Jays. If the games were to go 5, there would be a third game in Seattle or Detroit. And then if it were to go the whole way, winning 4 out of a best of 7 series, if it were to go all the way to the end, the final two games, games 6 and 7, would go down Sunday, October 19th, 2025, and Monday, October 20th, 2025, at Rogers Center to determine who is facing the National League champions, whoever wins the two NLDS series of those currently going on, which likely could get decided tonight. We could see Brewers versus Dodgers, or we could see one of those series getting decided tonight. The Cubs and the Phillies are on the brink of elimination, but they staved off elimination yesterday. Can they do so once again? And if they were to do it, we would find out who faces who in the NLCS the night after we find out who the Toronto Blue Jays will be taking on in the ALCS. We find out that answer tomorrow by the end of the evening. So we're going to start my BJFRs like this. I just laid out the format for who the Blue Jays are awaiting the winner of and what we could see decided tonight or this Saturday, this weekend, before the ALCS begins on Sunday. To kick it off into high gear, Yankee fans, listen, as a Blue Jays fan, I want to commend you on a great season. Yes, it didn't go the way that you wanted it to. And yes, the pesky Blue Jays, I'm going to call them that, just for the sake of the Yankee fans, the Blue Jays who took control of the American League East and ultimately ended up winning it, found a way to beat you in the ALDS and advance to the ALCS. Have a good off season. Do what you need to do. And I have no doubt in my mind that you'll be back next year looking, not necessarily for revenge, but looking to compete. I have a feeling that you will be looking to compete against the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, the Orioles, the Rays, the Dodgers, the Brewers, you name the squad. All right. For the Blue Jay fans, what a season it has been. We'll touch on for the Yankees as well in just a couple of minutes. How well players have played as of late, especially in this series. But I'm going to start on the Blue Jay side. We're not going to do it like we do Blue Jays game recap. We're just going to pick out some guys now that have stood out. Again, the final score of the final game, which sent the Blue Jays to the ALCS for the first time since 2016, was the Blue Jays 5 and the Yankees 2. Final scores all around for the series, the Blue Jays winning the only two they would play at home in dominating fashion, dominating the Yankees 10-1 on Saturday, October 4th, and on Sunday, October 5th, they dominated the Yankees 13-7. They fell in Tuesday's opener in New York, which was game number 3, a game that if they had won that game, we wouldn't be talking about yesterday's 5-2 win for the Jays. We would be talking about a 9-6 if it was in the Blue Jays' favor. It obviously wasn't. We would have been talking about a 9 Blue Jays win over the Yankees to advance to the ALCS. Obviously not in the cards. The final score of that game was 9-6, which forced Game 4 of the best of 5 series. And this game almost went the distance, but the Blue Jays beat the Yankees 5-2 and punched their ticket last night to the ALCS, where they now await the winner of Friday night's 8 p.m. Eastern contest between the Tigers and the Mariners. The winner will head for Toronto and get ready to play the Jays in a playoff series that could determine who's facing the winner of the NLCS in the 2025 World Series. Want to issue a quick Sports for Beginners note? That will be an episode on Sports for Beginners, no matter who makes it there. If it's the Blue Jays, we will have an episode for you. If it's one of the three remaining teams, the Mariners or the Tigers, that ends up in the World Series, we're still going to cover that on our Season 4 episode. If it's anyone else in the National League, say the Phillies and the Cubbies pull off a stunner tonight and force a Game 5 and then they stun Milwaukee and the Dodgers on Saturday, we will have whoever winds up in the NLCS and the ALCS that advance to the 2020 for the MLB. We will have coverage of that on Sports for Beginners, whoever it's going to be. And with that, let's get down to players on Toronto who I believe made an impact this season and throughout this series. Let's start with the pitching. I told people at Rogers Center after Game 1, when Kevin Gausman started the series, and of course the Jays won 10-1 that day, I was very nervous about Trey Yesavage not being up to the task of playing in a postseason game. I was expecting him to meet the moment, and guess what? He did exactly that. And what happened? The offense for the Jays explodes. And I mean explodes. Also, the Bronx Bombers offense explodes, but they fall 13-7 this time when Trey Yesavage starts his first postseason game. Will he start a postseason game against Seattle or Detroit, whoever they end up facing in the ALCS? The Blue Jays, that is? Maybe. Maybe not. I also was getting some notice on Bo Bichette, and we don't exactly know what his status is, but we do know now that the Jays are in the ALCS, we can monitor that and see if he will indeed make the ALCS roster so that he can have a shot at postseason baseball in 2025. Bo has been dealing with an injury and has not played in quite some time since the season ended. He also did not play in round 1 of the MLB playoffs for the Blue Jays, which is for all of baseball, round 2, the ALDS, because we always start in round 1, we always start with the AL and NL wildcards. Now, in a 4-round playoff, the Blue Jays have to win the ALCS, whoever they play, Seattle or Detroit, whoever they end up playing, they have to win that ALCS to move on to the final round of the playoffs, where they will face whoever is left remaining and also punched their ticket to the NLCS and was able to punch their ticket to the World Series. For the Jays, they haven't had to worry about the National League for quite some time. But now that you're in the ALCS, you gotta take care of your business, whether it's Seattle or Detroit. I really don't care who it is. And as the series goes on, once you're through a game or so, if you have a pretty good lead in the ALCS, you can start looking at the NLCS. But I wouldn't do it until possibly Game 4, Game 3. Game 4, Game 3. I wouldn't do it until then, because you never know. The ALCS and NLCS would be best of 7 series, which means you have to win 4 games to punch your ticket to the World Series. But to do that, first the Blue Jays have to await who they will play. And right now, that decision is not up to the MLB, and it's definitely not up to them. But it is definitely, I guess, if you want to bring the fans in, It is definitely up to us. Who do we, as Blue Jay fans, want to see compete against us in our home ballpark this Sunday? So let me ask the question, and this will be put up in future BJFRs, which are Blue Jays fan reactions for the postseason, but we're going to call them BJFRs, Blue Jay fans. Who do you want to see Vladimir Guerrero Jr., George Springer, Ernie Clement, and so many others in the Blue Jays organization, including manager John Schneider? Blue Jays fans, I want to know, who do you want to face? Who are you cheering for so that you can cheer against them when they play Toronto? Who do you want to win? Who do you want to win that ALCS series between Seattle and Detroit? Do you want the Tigers or do you want the Mariners? My question, once again, to be specific, is who do you want to see the Blue Jays play in the ALCS this Sunday? Who would you rather, Detroit or Seattle? Only for Blue Jay fans. I mentioned Trey Savage as one of my standout players. Kevin Gosman also mentioned him as well. And I also want to bring up the Blue Jays bullpen. Why are we bringing up the bullpen? Well, take a look at this. Louis Varland struggled in the 9-6 loss, but the Blue Jays said, Louis, we're going to do a bullpen game. So that's exactly what happened. So game 4 came. We did a bullpen game, and the bullpen, including with Louis Varland, shut down the Yankees. Gave up 2 runs in the process, but they shut them down, and the Blue Jays beat the Yanks 5-2 to punch their ticket to the ALCS and be the first team in baseball to punch their ticket to the ALCS, without having to play through the wild card. But everybody's got to play through the wild card, right? Well, not if you get a bye. If you get you get to move right to the ALDS. And then the winner of the wild card has to beat the winner who got to the ALDS in order to get to the ALCS. And with that said, one other Blue Jay player that stood out, I mentioned him before, that's Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Placata. You saw him at Rogers Center in this series, hit his first postseason home run of his career, but you also saw him hit his first postseason grand slam and the first postseason grand slam in Blue Jays history of Vladdy's career. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has had quite a postseason. What a year it has been for Vladdy. And last but certainly not least, Jeff Hoffman. Hoffman has had some rough outings this season. There's no sugarcoating that he has had some bad outings. But if you keep having faith in him and he surprises you, like he has surprised me, even when he's had bad days on the mound, bad outings, rather, he's always found a way to bounce back. And I believe yesterday he certainly did that. Yes, he put guys on base, which put us on the edge of our seats, watching and listening to Sportsnet, which had the coverage of postseason baseball, not from the Fox broadcast or FS1 broadcast. No disrespect to those guys. They did an excellent job doing it on the American station. But then again, on Sportsnet, you have the Blue Jays and the Yankees covered by the Blue Jays Sportsnet crew. And I want to give a shout out to the guys who were on Jays Talk after the game, since it was a weekday game, playoff game. Jeff Blair and Kevin Barker. Gentlemen, you called it. When we asked you at the Rogers Center on Sunday, how many games were the Blue Jays going to win in to punch the ticket to the ALCS? Jeff, you said 4. Kevin said he agreed with you. I also said that I agreed with you, and lo and behold, we're talking on a Thursday, the day after Game 4, and guess what? We're talking about a Blue Jays victory. What a day in Toronto sports, though, because the Maple Leafs also opening up their season in the NHL. They get a victory. What a turn of events it has been in New York. The Maple Leafs were opening up their season, by the way, in Toronto against the Montreal Canadiens, and they picked up a victory. Meanwhile, in New York, Toronto picked up a victory to go to the ALCS, and now they are off until Sunday. All right, we're going to take a quick break here on this reaction. When we come back, who has stood out for the Yankees this season, and who do I think played pretty well, and also who do I believe might have the most trouble looking back on this series and saying, if I did this, then this would happen. If you would like to stop the reaction here, by all means, go ahead. And I thank you for listening. But we are going to take a timeout. When we return, we'll talk about the Yankees, who I think did well, who I think stood out, and who do I believe is going to have a hard time forgetting about this series. Or in this case, going to be looking at it and saying, if I did this instead of what I did, then this would happen. Want to remind everybody also before we go to break, in the postseason, you have 2 challenges in each series. You do get an extra one, but it's a crew chief review when you go into the later innings, around the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. The season's over for the Yankees, but the postseason run for the Blue Jays continues into the ALCS. More on BJFR when we return.
Take another look with Gerda Felix and Melanie Taddeo Malo, 2 powerful women of diverse backgrounds having genuine, unique, and uncomfortable conversations that everyone needs to have. Join Melanie and Gerda for conversations about what is missing from human connections.
Hey, Penguins fans, it's time for that all-important pre-show on the radio network of the Pittsburgh Penguins, WXDX FM Pittsburgh. Tonight we take on the New York Islanders. Join me after the game and after every Penguins game this season, only on the ice and behind the benches for Penguins post-game. Let's go see what we can do against the team beside me in our Pittsburgh Penguins. Penguins and Islanders tomorrow on the ice and behind the benches on Penguins post-game. Enjoy the game tonight, post-game show tomorrow, and keep it locked to Penguins Weekly Recap starting on October 13th, 2025, only on Sports for Beginners.
CNT Radio will never give you up. They will never let you down, nor will they run around or desert you. So join Nick Astley for The Melting Pot every Saturday on CNT Radio. Hang on a minute. He's not Nick Astley. Oh, jings, I've done it wrong. Anyway, just join Nick for The Melting Pot on CNT Radio.
All right, welcome in, everybody. Welcome back in, everybody, to BJFR. I am Scott McGregor, your host of the program, one of your outgoing hosts of the program. Thomas and I will split duties between BJFR for the postseason for the Toronto Blue Jays. Blue Jays winning 3-1 over the New York Yankees. They recently, last night, beat the Yankees 5-2. Wait, the winner of Mariners Tigers first pitch 8:08 p.m. tomorrow night Eastern time. In the meantime, the NLDS continues looking for their first punchy to the NLCS. Will the Dodgers get the job done tonight, or will they come up short and have to play back in Philly on Saturday to decide the game? And of course, on the other side, it's the Brewers and the Cubs. The winner moves on. If it's the Brewers, and the same thing in the Phillies-Dodgers series, if it's the Dodgers, they move on. If it's the Brewers, they move on. And we have a Brewers-Dodgers NLCS. But if the Cubbies and the Brewers win, if the Cubbies and the Phillies win, we decided in Philly and in Milwaukee to see which two will face each other for chance to fight whoever the Blue Jays fight in the ALCS, which we will know the answer by tomorrow. All right, let's keep it back to the ALDS winners in the Blue Jays as they win 3 in the series and have advanced to the ALCS, gonna play either the Tigers or the Mariners. Before the break, I mentioned my question that I will keep up for other postseason series, but my specific question for the ALCS is for the Blue Jay fans, who would you rather face, Detroit or Seattle? Who would you rather face? Let's talk Yankees. And I'm going to start with the players who stood out for the Yankees. I wholeheartedly believe Aaron Judge is one of our standout players from this Yankees offense. But I also go to the pitching side and I go to Luke Weaver. Now, why do I go to Weaver? Well, look, the dude has struggled, and he's also a guy that stands out to me. I should have been specific when I said stands out. I also meant guys that didn't quite have a good series or have been struggling and found ways to bounce back, shall we say. Do I think Luke Weaver had a good series? No. Do I think Luke Weaver is bad? Absolutely not. Was he bad in this series? Yeah, he was. But he had a lot of good pitches, and I'm sure he will tell you when he's ready, obviously, not now, but when he's ready, he will tell you, look, some of my pitches were in spots I didn't want them to be in, and the Blue Jays were taking advantage of that because the pitches that I threw were right where they wanted them. They did not hit the spot. And that's the same thing with Max Fried. I mean, listen to this. I'm going back to the Max Fried game back at Rogers Center. That was the game where Trey Yesavage started. 3 innings of work, 8 hits allowed by Fried, 7 earned runs, 2 walks, a strikeout, and a home run. Was his ERA as bad as Luke Weaver's? No. Luke Weaver's was much worse. 135 was the ERA for Luke Weaver. For Max Fried, it was 6.75. What about Will Warren? Not too bad. 4 2/3, 7 hits allowed, 6 earned runs, 4 homers allowed. That's bad. He only walked 1 Blue Jay, and the same amount of home runs that he gave up, 4 of them, were also the amount of Ks he had. Altogether, Yankee pitching in the game they lost 13-7 had struck out the Blue Jays 5 times. Rather, they had struck out 5 Blue Jays. Maybe not 5 times, but they at least struck out 1 Blue Jay twice. With that said, let's take a look at Trent Grisham. In the game they lost 13-7, Grisham went 1 for 5 with 3 strikeouts and a run scored also. And a lot of people, and I'm not being you know what here. I want to be as honest as possible with Yankees, but this drives me crazy. When you do something to a player like Anthony Volpe, did Anthony Volpe have a good year? No. Did he struggle? Absolutely. He was what you would call the Yankee error king. He had too many errors in this game. Too many errors this season, rather. Too many errors that you could blame on him, but maybe some of them weren't on him. The dude was doing his absolute best, and that's all you can count for. Another guy that stands out. Hope you didn't think I was going to mention him, but it's the manager, Aaron Boone. I saw him in game 1. I believe it was game 1. I did see him come up on the steps in Rogers Center. I did see him. And the same thing in game 2. I did see him come up. It looked like he was going to start something. He asked for an exclamation, and he got an exclamation from the umpiring crew at home plate. And then you go to Yankee Stadium. Nobody gets ejected in this series, which is good news, not just for baseball, but good news for the teams in general. But you also almost, and I mean almost, risked getting ejected in your home park when you were down 2-0. And guess what? Even if Aaron Boone did get ejected down in the series, maybe that sparks the Yankees to, as Michael Kay said it, shout out to Michael Kay, figure it out. Because the one thing as a baseball fan I will not stand for, the one thing I will not stand for is people going at the officiating crew and saying in public on social media, now, you could do this if you really want to, but I wouldn't do it if I were you. I really wouldn't. I do not like hearing when people say, and I'm talking to everybody, when everybody that would do this says, the reason why we lost this game is because we got screwed. No, that's not the reason. The reason why, and if you heard John Schneider talk about it before the season ended, even if you're a Jay fan and you did this kind of thing, not saying you did. I'm not saying you did. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, if you heard what John said after the Red Sox loss, before the Blue Jays played Tampa Bay and ended up sweeping Tampa Bay at home at Rogers Center, John said when the Jays lost 7-1, he said, I don't want to put fire to that narrative that the reason we lost games is because we got screwed. He said, no, the reason we lost games or we were losing games was because we weren't generating enough offense and we weren't scoring enough runs. Never mind generating enough offense. We weren't scoring enough runs is what he said. And I put that into my head and I said, you're right. You haven't been doing that. And the other reason I bring this up is because you're not going to win games if you can't score runs, especially in baseball. You're never going to win a baseball game if you cannot score runs, and enough runs, if that, to win the game. I won't talk about complimentary baseball because I'm not even sure if that's a thing. If you play well in baseball, you're going to win games. So to wrap this up, I gotta just tell you, I think it's gonna be Detroit versus Toronto. I really do. But if it ends up Seattle and Toronto, I wish both teams the best of luck. And I hope Toronto can beat Seattle and make it to that area that we have wanted since 1992 and 93 when we did it in back-to-back years. But make no mistake about it, it is hard to repeat, let alone three-peat. Nobody has ever done that. Not to my knowledge, at least. If you know a team that's ever done it, let me know. I think it's going to be Detroit versus Toronto in the ALCS. That's what I think. You may have a difference of opinion, but we're all entitled to our own opinions. I'll wrap it all up here by saying I'm grateful the Blue Jays have won that series. It wasn't a repeat of last year's playoffs where we were in, or of the last time we were in the playoffs, rather. Not last year, but when we were last in the playoffs. It wasn't a repeat of that where we lost games against Seattle and that was our season. Again, that was in the wild card round, by the way. It was more of whether we were in 2015 or 2016. That's what this season is kind of feeling like for this Blue Jays team. I know I'm not really wearing any Blue Jay stuff right now. You can see I have a sweater on. But right now, the way this Blue Jays team is playing in the ALDS and now on their way to the ALCS for the first time since 2016, it's reminding me of those seasons. That's what this is reminding me of. Those types of seasons. When you had guys like Edwin Encarnacion, Jose Bautista, Danny Jansen was still a J at the time, and a couple others that I could mention. Heck, you had Russell Martin on that team. And let's not forget, Kevin Pillar was a part of one of those teams. Wow, what a difference it makes. All right, everyone, reaction is almost done. But one more time, I want to remind you that if you are joining us as also a Canadian Penguins fan like myself, I will be back on the ice and behind the benches studio area for game number 2 of 82 when the Penguins take on the Islanders. Game time set for 7 p.m. Eastern. It is 6:24 p.m. Eastern, so not far behind from now. They will be dropping the puck. But to wrap us up here, I honestly don't care about the National League yet until we see who the Final Four are. We know the Blue Jays are one of the teams in the Final Four, but we don't know if Milwaukee, LA, the Dodgers, not the Angels, the Dodgers, Milwaukee, or the Phillies and the Cubs are going to be one of the four. And the other team, we don't know who will be most likely a part of the Final Four. Whoever will win, Detroit and Seattle. But that is it for this one. Thank you very much for joining us on BJFR. My name is Scott McGregor. Thank you so much for being with us. We added a little hockey there, not too much, but a little hockey. Enjoy the rest of the postseason until the Jays play again. Will they play the Tigers? Will they play the Mariners? We will know after Friday. I will, of course, continue to do these in audio. I did one in video to start. We will do them in audio later if need be. Whether it's me or Thomas next, I'm pretty sure the two of us would love to be together to do a BJFR together if the Blue Jays make it past the ALCS. But until then, keep taking it one game at a time, one day at a time. The new slogan for the postseason is "Want It All." But there was also a slogan this season called "Lights Up, Let's Go." And that's how I'm going to end my BJFR until we know who the Blue Jays are facing in the ALCS. I am Scott McGregor saying, lights up, let's go Blue Jays. We're going to the ALCS for the first time since 2016, and it's going to be fun. We want it all. Like I said before, thank you for joining us. Click like if you like this video. Click subscribe if you really like it. Tell all your friends that we are doing BJFR, that's Blue Jay Fan Reactions, with myself or my brother Thomas filling in for us to do these kinds of things. I really appreciate you joining us, and we will see you after the ALCS for another BJFR. Enjoy the action. Thank you so much for listening to Sports for Beginners. If you would like to learn more about the show, you can visit the podcast Facebook page or visit the official website. You can also send us an email at sportsforbeginners podcast8231@gmail.com. As we always remind you, it is not goodbye, it is until next time.